What happens when Western censors decide that drawings are more dangerous than live actors? Some anime films were blocked, shortened, renamed, or quietly buried because officials believed viewers could not handle them. A few were completely banned. Others survived only after entire scenes vanished. Before we open the first forbidden case, hit like and share this video with an anime fan you know. Subscribe to the channel, because the titles near number 1 make animation controversies look almost harmless. Number 17. Royal Space Force, The Wings of Enemies, 1987. Sometimes censorship does not arrive with a government stamp. It arrives through a distributor quietly removing material before officials can demand anything. This ambitious science fiction drama follows Shirotsuge Ladat, a directionless young man who joins his country's nearly forgotten space program. At first, the project looks like a national joke. The pilots are mocked, the machines barely work, and politicians care more about publicity than discovery. After meeting the deeply religious Riquini, however, Shirotsuge begins treating the mission seriously. His planned launch becomes both a personal escape and a symbol other people want to control. The film's most famous sequence is the final rocket launch. Soldiers fight below while Shirotsuge rises through smoke, clouds, and silence. Looking down at the curved planet, he offers a prayer that sounds hopeful but also uncertain. The moment asks whether progress can remain pure when governments build it beside weapons. For its early British release, a troubling encounter between Shirotsuge and Riquini was shortened so the film could receive a more marketable certificate. The movie was not banned outright, yet British audiences initially saw a softened version shaped by commercial fear. Later editions restored the missing material. That history showed how even respected animation could be quietly altered when distributors assumed cartoons needed protection from their own adult themes. Most buyers were never clearly told what had vanished. Number 16. Angel Cop, 1989. Political censorship can be harder to notice than missing action because the pictures remain while the meaning changes underneath them. Set in a violent near-future Japan, this 6-part OVA follows government agent Angel and her partner Raiden as they battle terrorists, corrupt officials, and enhanced enemies. The story begins like a harsh police thriller, before widening into a conspiracy involving foreign influence, secret experiments, and powerful people willing to sacrifice civilians. Angel believes force can solve almost anything, yet each mission reveals that her own government may be as dangerous as the attackers. One unforgettable sequence sends Angel racing after a fleeing suspect through crowded streets while vehicles crash around her. The chase is loud, fast, and deliberately excessive. It announces that this is not a bright superhero cartoon. It is an angry cyberpunk nightmare where nearly every institution has already failed. Western editions kept much of the destruction but changed the conspiracy itself. References blaming an international Jewish organization were removed or rewritten from American and British versions because the original repeated a hateful conspiracy theory. British censors also shortened several violent moments. The dialogue change was understandable, but it transformed the identity of the hidden enemy and altered the political message driving the entire plot. Many English-language viewers therefore watched a different explanation for the conflict, without realizing the story had been rewritten around them for decades. Already seeing familiar titles? Tell us which censored edition you owned, and send this video to a collector who remembers the old tapes. Subscribe now, because the authorities become far less forgiving from here onward. Number 15. Mad Bull 34, 1990. Imagine a New York police story where restraint has disappeared and every street seems designed for maximum destruction. The 4-part production follows Japanese-American rookie officer Daizaburo Ediban and his enormous partner John Estes, better known as Sleepy. Daizaburo believes police work requires rules, patience, and evidence. Sleepy treats it like open warfare. Their partnership becomes a savage parody of American action movies, packed with crooked criminals, absurd weapons, and confrontations that grow more ridiculous every minute. A famous early sequence shows Sleepy arriving during a street incident and responding with methods so extreme that even his partner freezes in disbelief. The scene is intentionally outrageous, yet its mixture of comedy, cruelty, and humiliation made Western classifiers uncomfortable. When the first 2 installments reached Britain, almost 2 minutes disappeared. One passage was shortened for violent imagery, while another scene involving the degrading mistreatment of a male character was heavily reduced. Those edits did not erase the basic plot, but they interrupted the ugly joke at the center of the series. Sleepy is presented as the hero even though he may be the most frightening person in the city. American viewers later received an uncut edition. British collectors, meanwhile, spent years encountering incomplete tapes, often without warnings that their copies had been changed. The show survived, but its Western reputation was built from versions that were not the same. Number 14. Crying Freeman, 1988. Behind the elegant artwork lies the story of a man whose identity has been stolen by the organization that turned him into a weapon. Yo Hinomura begins as a quiet ceramic artist. After witnessing a killing, he is captured, conditioned, and transformed into an assassin called Freeman. He completes every assignment with terrifying skill, yet tears run down his face whenever he takes a life. Those tears reveal the humanity his controllers could never fully destroy. The scene most fans remember begins when artist Emu Hino sees Freeman finishing a mission. Instead of panicking, she calmly accepts that he may return for her. Her strange courage fascinates him, and their meeting changes both lives. What looked like a crime thriller becomes a tragic romance about two people trying to choose each other inside a world ruled by fear. British releases allowed the early chapters to pass mostly intact, but later installments were cut for coercion, assault, and violent intimidation. Episodes 4, 5, and 6 all lost material, with the final chapter receiving the greatest reduction. Manga Entertainment later combined installments on fewer tapes, making those changes less obvious to buyers. The censorship preserved Freeman's central journey, but it softened the criminal world surrounding him. That mattered, because the ugliness of that world explains why Emu becomes his only path back toward freedom, tenderness, and a life he actually chose. Number 13. Adventure Kid, 1992. Even the title worried British censors because they feared the word kid could attract the audience this supernatural production was never made for. The story begins when a young man discovers an object tied to demons, family secrets, and a conflict stretching across generations. What first resembles a fantasy quest quickly turns into a much darker adult nightmare. Secret chambers open, old promises return, and the hero realizes that his bloodline has connected him to forces he barely understands. One widely remembered sequence sends the characters into a distorted supernatural space where ordinary rooms bend, monstrous figures emerge from the walls, and reality follows dream logic. The shifting setting makes the danger feel less like a normal battle and more like a curse swallowing the world. British officials demanded that the Western title be changed from Adventure Kid to Adventure Duo. That was only the beginning. The first installment lost more than a minute, the second lost over 7 minutes, and the third lost more than 9. Nearly 18 minutes disappeared from the British release. Australia also initially rejected the opening episode before a shorter version appeared. Conversations, supernatural events, and transitions were rebuilt around the missing footage, causing parts of the story to jump without explanation. North American viewers received a more complete edition, while British fans were left with a renamed, reduced shadow of the original work. Number 12. Wicked City, 1987. A peace treaty between humans and demons sounds impossible, but the greatest threat comes from extremists determined to keep both worlds at war. Secret Agent Taki is ordered to protect Giuseppe Maillart, an elderly diplomat preparing to renew an agreement between the human world and the mysterious black world. Taki is paired with Makie, a powerful agent from the other side. Their partnership begins with suspicion, but repeated attacks force them to trust each other while enemies close in from every direction. The film's famous hotel sequence turns an ordinary room into a living trap. Walls bend, shadows move, and a visitor who seemed human reveals a monstrous form. Director Yoshiaki Kawajiri uses darkness and shifting bodies to make the city itself feel infected by the conflict. British home video censors removed roughly 1 minute and 48 seconds, mainly from disturbing scenes in which Makie is captured and threatened. The edits reduced both the duration and the intensity of her ordeal. That affected more than shock value, because Taki's decision to rescue her proves that he no longer sees beings from the black world as disposable enemies. A later theatrical edition was treated differently, and decades afterward, Britain finally received an uncut release. For years, however, viewers knew the movie through a version that protected them by weakening one of its most important emotional turning points without plainly admitting it. Number 11. Violence Jack, Evil Town, 1988. After an earthquake destroys civilization, the survivors do not rebuild society. They divide the ruins, create brutal factions, and become more dangerous than the disaster. A group of ordinary people is trapped beneath a devastated city where rival gangs control food, shelter, and escape routes. Into this underground war walks Jack, a gigantic wanderer whose true nature remains unclear. At times, he acts like a rescuer. At others, he seems like a force of destruction created by the ruined world itself. The film's most famous image shows Jack emerging from darkness while terrified survivors stare upward. His size appears almost impossible, making him look less like a man than a punishment delivered by the broken city. Britain received a version that had already been shortened before submission. The BPFC then required additional removals. Related chapters in the trilogy were also hit hard, with Hell's Wind losing more than 6 minutes and Slum King receiving its own reductions. Australia went further. Evil Town was refused classification in 1997, and the planned release of the full trilogy was abandoned. Even though the submitted edition was already censored, officials still considered it beyond the legal limit. Unauthorized copies later appeared carrying false rating labels, turning the production into an underground object traded by collectors who often had no idea which version they owned or how much footage had disappeared forever. Number 10. Ninja Scroll, 1993. Few anime films shaped the Western idea of adult animation more strongly, yet many early viewers never saw the complete movie. Wandering swordsman Jubei Kibagami becomes trapped in a conspiracy after rescuing Kagero, a ninja whose body has been made poisonous. Together with the government spy Dakuan, they confront the Devils of Kimon, a group of warriors possessing unnatural abilities. Each enemy turns a familiar ninja skill into something frighteningly impossible. The duel against Tessai remains legendary. The enormous stone-skinned fighter appears impossible to injure until Jubei uses the surrounding forest and Tessai's own strength against him. Fast sword movements, crashing trees, and sudden silence make the confrontation feel brutal but carefully controlled. British censors removed roughly 53 seconds involving prohibited weapons and threatening material directed at Kagero. Australia originally classified the movie for viewers 15 and older, but political complaints after a television broadcast triggered a formal review. The rating was raised to adults only, and a later broadcast was edited. Ironically, an Australian DVD accidentally used the censored British master. The distributor eventually admitted the mistake and later issued an uncut anniversary release. The movie survived, but its international history became a maze of shortened tapes, revised ratings, broadcast changes, and discs that promised completeness while quietly carrying footage already removed somewhere else. For collectors, buying the film became almost as confusing as following its supernatural conspiracy. Number 9. Urotsuki Doji 4, Infernal Road, 1995. By the 4th chapter, British authorities had spent years cutting this apocalyptic franchise, but Infernal Road finally pushed them from reduction toward refusal. The story continues across a shattered world where humans, demons, and beast-like beings struggle after a supernatural catastrophe. Survivors cross ruined cities searching for shelter and meaning, while rival forces attempt to control the Overfiend, a figure connected to destruction, rebirth, and the union of 3 worlds. Its most striking passages show broken skylines beneath unnatural skies. Small groups move through empty landscapes while creatures appear far away. The scale makes humanity look temporary, as though the planet has already passed into the hands of something older. 3 episodes were prepared for British release. Classifiers refused the first 2, meaning they could not legally be distributed in the form submitted. Only the final episode received approval for the disc. Western customers were therefore offered the conclusion, while the beginning and middle remained missing. This was not a simple case of several frames being trimmed. The decision shattered the narrative itself. Anyone hoping to follow the journey had to find foreign copies, unofficial imports, or written summaries. After years of shortening earlier installments, British censorship had reached an endpoint. Most of an entire chapter effectively vanished from the legitimate market, while its ending sat alone like evidence of a story viewers were forbidden to witness. Number 8. Urotsuki Doji. 3. Return of the Overfiend, 1992. Long before the third chapter reached Western shelves, distributors understood that an untouched edition had almost no chance of surviving British classification. The story moves the supernatural conflict to Caesar's palace, where rival beings search for the person destined to become the true Overfiend. Behind the casino lights, demons manipulate human characters, secret identities unravel, and the boundary between three worlds begins collapsing again. The setting matters because it places ancient prophecy inside a modern temple built around money, spectacle, and desire. One memorable sequence transforms the resort into a supernatural battlefield. Neon signs flicker, corridors twist, and guests run, while enormous forces begin tearing through the building. The strange mixture of casino glamour and apocalyptic horror gives the chapter an identity unlike the earlier films. What should be a place of artificial excitement becomes a doorway to genuine terror. Several episodes were shortened before they were even submitted to British censors. Officials then demanded additional reductions. One installment fell from almost 48 minutes to roughly 42, while another dropped from almost 50 minutes to just over 41. This meant more than shocking imagery disappeared. Dialogue, transitions, character motivation, and pieces of the mythology were removed as well. Australian releases appear to have used these already approved British masters, spreading the same shortened material into another market. Viewers could purchase a box promoted as a special edition, yet that label concealed a basic fact. Substantial sections had vanished before many customers even knew another cut existed. The censorship did not merely hide isolated moments. It changed the rhythm of the story, making complicated events feel rushed and confusing, then left audiences blaming the anime rather than the people who had dismantled it. Number 7. Mezzo Forte, 2000. A kidnapping assignment becomes a battle against gangsters, assassins, and a young woman whose cheerful smile hides almost impossible fighting skill. Mikura works for the Danger Service Agency alongside inventor Harada and former police officer Kurokawa. Their latest job is to abduct crime boss Momokichi Momoi, but the plan collapses when they encounter his daughter, Momomi. She appears playful and careless, yet she can defeat trained attackers with speed that makes every carefully designed plan useless. What begins as a paid assignment turns into a personal struggle between two women who recognize something of themselves in each other. The standout scene is Mikura and Momomi's extended fight through the family compound. Furniture breaks, bullets tear through rooms, and both continue attacking with almost superhuman energy. The sharp animation makes the confrontation feel like a live-action crime movie, freed from physical limits. Every movement reveals personality. Mikura fights to survive, while Momomi seems to enjoy the chaos. Western distributors faced a second problem beyond the violent plot. The original production contained adult material largely separate from the central kidnapping story. Australia's Madman Entertainment announced that it would release a modified version because the complete cut was expected to be refused classification. The company argued that the removed scenes did not meaningfully affect the narrative, and chose not to risk submitting the original. An international edition later added action and story material, while excluding the most controversial passages. Consequently, Mezzo Forte exists in several distinct cuts. Two fans can truthfully claim they watched the same title while remembering different running times, transitions, and even character beats. Censorship did not erase the film, but it made the idea of a single definitive version unusually difficult to defend even today. Number 6. Spotlight, 2002. Submitting a shortened edition usually satisfies a classification board. In this case, even the distributor's first attempt at censorship was still considered unacceptable. The production takes place inside a performing arts environment, where ambition, status, and manipulation become connected. Performers compete for attention while authority figures exploit their control over careers and access. What begins as a show business story slowly exposes a system in which promises of success are used to silence resistance. Its most discussed sequence involves an instructor delivering what he describes as a private lesson. The scene changes the tone. Bright rehearsal room energy gives way to intimidation, and the performer realizes that professional opportunity has been turned into a trap. Australian officials later focused on this material when examining the release. The original DVD was refused classification in May 2006. A modified edition was submitted the next year, yet that version was also rejected. Only after more material had been removed did a third cut receive an adults-only certificate. That process created 3 separate forms of the same production: the original, a censored edition that remained legally unacceptable, and a further reduced version that could be sold. By the time Australian viewers received it, the distributor had rebuilt scenes and transitions around missing footage. This was censorship through negotiation, rather than one ban. Each submission asked how much could disappear before the work stopped crossing the legal line. The eventual release proved that almost any title might pass if a company was willing to keep cutting. It also raised a darker question. When repeated edits remove the context showing abuse of power, does censorship protect the audience, or does it accidentally make the powerful characters appear less frightening than the story intended? Number 5. Holy Virgins, 2006. A disc that first entered Australian stores with an adults-only certificate was later pulled back before officials and banned from legal sale. The story is set around a religious institution where several trainees become involved with a doctor who abuses his professional authority. Although the production uses exaggerated animation and fantasy-like presentation, its central power imbalance is intentionally disturbing. The characters believe they are entering a place of care and discipline, only to discover that trust can be used against them. The most controversial passage features a smaller, childlike character holding a teddy bear and appearing confused by the situation around her. That visual design became central to the classification dispute. Australian law did not look only at the age stated in dialogue or promotional notes. Officials also considered how young a character appeared on screen. The DVD initially received an R18+ rating and entered the market. That decision was then challenged, sending the title to a 6-member review panel. By a 5-to-1 majority, the panel concluded that the youthful appearance of one character placed the material beyond what could legally remain even in an adults-only category. The certificate was changed to refused classification, preventing further legal sale, rental, or importation in Australia. Public controversy surrounding the decision also encouraged a major retail chain to remove a broader range of adult anime from its shelves. Unlike a normal edited release, this case moved backward. A product that had already been approved became prohibited after review. Buyers who had seen it legally suddenly owned something stores were no longer allowed to carry. The reversal demonstrated how unstable anime classification could be when drawings, stated ages, visual appearance, and political pressure collided inside one decision without warning. Number 4. How Not to Summon a Demon Lord, Season 2, 2021. An entire 2-disc release was blocked because of one promotional image appearing after an episode. The story follows Takuma Sakamoto, a socially isolated gamer transported into the body of his game character, Diablo. Accompanied by Rem and Shera, he meets Priestess Lumachina and becomes involved in her fight against corruption within the church. Takuma looks like an unbeatable demon lord, but inside he remains nervous, awkward, and terrified of speaking honestly. The season's most memorable action sequence places Diablo against a dragon while his companions struggle below. Magic fills the sky, buildings shake, and his arrogant personality hides the frightened gamer still controlling the body. The clash captures the show's central joke. The person who appears most confident is often the least comfortable person in the room. Australia refused classification to the Season 2 Blu-ray in January 2023. Surprisingly, the decisive problem was not the dragon battle, the religious conflict, or the main storyline. Officials objected to a still image used as a preview after Episode 3, saying several characters appeared too young while being presented suggestively. Because that image was included on the disc, all 10 episodes became legally unavailable in that edition. Britain later passed the season uncut with an adults-only certificate, showing how differently 2 Western systems could judge identical material. Crunchyroll eventually submitted an Australian release. It received an MA15+ rating and reached stores months later. One changed preview image had determined whether more than 4 hours of animation could legally be sold. The case proved that censorship does not always target the story viewers came to watch. Sometimes a few seconds after the credits can lock an entire season outside the market. Number 3. Puni Puni Poemi, 2001. This hyperactive parody was banned in New Zealand, remained prohibited for years, and later returned after officials accepted that audiences understood anime differently. 10-year-old Poemi dreams of becoming a voice actress. After alien invaders attack, she transforms into a magical heroine and joins a family of superpowered sisters. The plot deliberately mocks magical girl clichés, production tricks, fan service, speeches, and even the people making the show. Characters shout over one another, scenes collapse without warning, and the heroine seems aware that she is trapped inside a ridiculous cartoon. Its most famous sequence has Poemi breaking the fourth wall so aggressively that she appears to argue with animators, voice actors, and viewers at the same time. The speed is exhausting, but that self-awareness later became important when authorities reconsidered the title. New Zealand classified the DVD as objectionable in 2004, focusing on an assault sequence involving characters presented as children. A later challenge did not free it, and the production remained legally unavailable. Years afterward, the case was reviewed again. The classification office noted that anime had become more familiar to audiences and that viewers were now more likely to understand the scene as extreme satire rather than approval of its behavior. In June 2021, the ban was replaced with an R16 restriction. That reversal remains remarkable because the animation itself had not changed. What changed was the assumed media literacy of the public. A work once treated as too dangerous to possess became legal because officials believed viewers could better recognize parody, exaggeration, and deliberate bad taste. The case suggested that censorship sometimes reveals less about a film than it reveals about what authorities think audiences are capable of understanding. Number 2. Urotsuki Doji. 2. Legend of the Demon Womb, 1991. Cutting 3 minutes did not save this sequel. Australian officials rejected it again and forced the distributor to return with an even shorter version. The film expands the mythology of the Overfiend by connecting the supernatural apocalypse to experiments conducted during the Second World War. Scientists attempt to summon a power called the Lord of Chaos, believing they can control the answer. Instead, their work creates consequences that survive for decades. The story links wartime horror to a modern search for a being who may decide 3 worlds. Its defining sequence takes place beneath Berlin, where machinery, laboratories, symbols, and supernatural energy combine. The experiment begins with confidence, then collapses as the researchers realize they opened a doorway instead of a weapon. What they wanted to command becomes something no human institution can contain. An 87-minute edition was submitted to Australia in 1995 and refused classification. The distributor removed roughly 3 minutes and tried again. The 84-minute cut was also refused. Only a later version, running a little over 82 minutes in PAL format, secured an adults-only rating in May 1996. British censors had approved their own shortened master, and later Australian discs appear to have used that edition. Legal Western copies were therefore assembled through layers of changes made in different countries. What makes this case remarkable is the repeated failure. The distributor followed the demand, removed material, and resubmitted, yet officials still said no. The film had to be reduced again before adults could choose it. By then, viewers were not watching a censored sequel. They were watching the outcome of a negotiation in which every missing minute represented another attempt to make this nightmare acceptable again. Number 1. Urotsuki Doji, Legend of the Overfiend, 1989. No anime represents the moment Western authorities discovered that animation could be darker, stranger, and more confrontational than most live-action cinema. The story imagines 3 connected realms inhabited by humans, demons, and beast-like beings. Every 3,000 years, a powerful figure called the Overfiend is expected to unite them. Amano Jaku searches Earth for this being and eventually focuses on an ordinary student named Tatsuo Nagumo. The promised union is described like salvation, but each sign suggests that prophecy may have been misunderstood. The sequence that defined the film's reputation is not one moment, it is the apocalyptic transformation of Tokyo. Buildings collapse, forms rise above the skyline, and the joining of worlds looks less like peace than total destruction. The scale of the disaster changed what Western viewers believed animation was allowed to show. Australia refused registration to a theatrical version prepared for a film festival in March 1994. A review board upheld the decision, rejecting the argument that exaggerated drawings reduced the impact. A modified video edition later gained an adults-only rating and was promoted with the claim that it had been banned twice. Britain removed more than 2 minutes from its compilation film release. The feature had already been created by shortening and combining 3 longer OVA episodes, so Western audiences encountered several layers of alteration. Material lost during compilation, further footage removed by national boards, and different modified editions circulated across markets. The West did not erase Legend of the Overfiend. Censorship transformed it into forbidden mythology. Every refusal, missing minute, and edited tape made viewers more determined to discover what officials believed they should never see. The attempt to bury the film became the reason its reputation survived. These titles prove that censorship does not always destroy a film. Sometimes it creates a legend. Western boards removed scenes, rewrote dialogue, rejected complete releases, and even reversed decisions decades later. Yet collectors kept searching, distributors kept resubmitting, and forbidden editions refused to disappear. Which entry shocked you most, and which missing version should finally be restored? Share your answer below, like the video, and subscribe for more forgotten stories from animation's strangest history, where art repeatedly challenged official fear.